Morning, Ben. No pressure then. You've just got to inspire the people listening to become the next unicorns.
Good morning. Yeah, I'm looking forward to chatting to you.
Yeah. Obviously, a lot of entrepreneurs on this call, and not everybody hits the sweet spot in business first off. Gymshark wasn't your first venture as a youngster. Talk us through some of the other ideas you'd had before Gymshark and what happened to them.
Oh, God. Well, I guess if I go all the way back, so growing up, my first job, it was actually when I was doing work experience. I worked for my granddad, who would sort of go around mainly the West Midlands. Sometimes he'd go a bit further south. And what we would do is we'd line furnaces with ceramic fibre and brick and things like that. So we'd just sort of be all sort of traveling all around. Anyway, I was working with him for a while. And the first thing I ever did, which was when I was very young, was just something very minor, making him sort of his business cards, his website and all that sort of stuff. So that was like my first ever like venture, I would guess, albeit it wasn't like a typical thing in terms of building income. And then, to be honest, I just kept doing things throughout my sort of teenage years. I made fitness apps on the iPhone, different websites, fitness forums. They were always around the things that I was sort of passionate about. But I think Gymshark was the 7th or 8th website that I actually made. So every single one before that failed miserably, but I had a great time doing it.
And presumably great experience for when it did work.
Exactly that. And to be honest, I think, do you know what, working with my granddad was particularly useful because it made me realize. So I think there's this big thing that's built around risk and entrepreneurs taking risk. And I do agree, entrepreneurs take big risks. And I sort of cringe a little bit sometimes when people talk about the risks that I took. Because when I was first doing work experience with him at about 12, 13 years old, he told me about how he remortgaged the house to do a job on a furnace, essentially remortgaged the house so that he could afford all the materials to do the job. And at that point, he had 2 kids, my nan, a house, a mortgage, everything that comes with it, all the pressures. When I took my risk, I was like 16, 17, 18, 19 years old, and I was just risking the money that I'd earned from Pizza Hut. So I think, particularly if you're young and have the opportunity to take risk, then I think you should absolutely take it. So yeah, when you're talking about my risk, I do sort of cringe a little bit because I just think my risks were minor in comparison to what other people take.
Just talk us through. I know. Doing some research, you were saying that it dawned on you that there was a difference in your sort of friendship group, if you like, of what they used to do on a Friday night after work, and how that societal change really made a difference. You know, they were going down the pub, but you guys weren't. So just talk us through that, because that was quite key.
It was this really weird thing, right? So in my year at school was. I don't know, for whatever reason, everyone was properly into sport. It was a competitive year. Like, it was football. I mean, to be honest, pretty much 90% of people were playing football. A few people were playing rugby. But then as you get to sort of 16 years old, you realize that you're not going to be a professional footballer. So all of a sudden that switch then went into the gym. And it was really funny how you'd literally finish school on a day, and then the year above us would all go to the pub after school, and then we would all go to the gym. And the gym was like almost like our social hub, I don't know what you want to call it, like a watering hole. It was like the place where everyone went. And even if people weren't going to lift, you'd go just because all your mates were going there. You'd spend time with them there. It was like a social club. So that was a really interesting shift that at the time I just thought nothing of. But now looking back, I'm realizing that was the sort of societal shift that people were doing in terms of, you know, prioritizing their health and fitness.
But lots of people have those, but I suppose it's taking advantage of those societal shifts. And I know people will know this, so we'll be quick on it, but you realise that sportswear companies weren't catering for that community.
Yeah, and this was the thing. It wasn't, when Gymshark first started, it was nothing to do with like us actually wanting to build a business as such. We were quite naive, and because I'd made a website and apps and all these different things, we sort of built the Gymshark website, and it was selling supplements for a bit. And then after a while, wanting to make clothes. And it was just quite simply a case of, well, if we've done websites and apps, sort of how hard can clothes be, sort of thing. So that's when we brought the screen print and the sewing machine and just made the clothes that we wanted to wear. So again, it wasn't let's make some clothes and let's sell them. It was no one's making the product that we want. So why don't we have a go at making it ourselves?
So actually, we talk a lot about digital entrepreneurship, but it's actually all down to your grandma, isn't it, really? She taught you how to sew.
Yeah, exactly that. So I mean, don't get me wrong, I was very, very fortunate. So I've come from quite an entrepreneurial family, but all my grandparents own their own business. You know, even beyond them, they would own their own business. There's sort of stories in our family you'd hear growing up about our great granddad who owned sort of TV shops and whatnot. And he would put the football on in the front of the shop so that passers-by could watch the football. And that was like a really sort of thing that no one sort of did back in the day. So I was quite lucky in that sense because I had that inspiration coming from my sort of grandparents and great grandparents. So that was really interesting. But yeah.
And tell us how it took off. So you started making clothes. You and a friend, the partner, started making clothes and posting them off yourself. So just sort of how long did that take before you thought, you know, I'm onto something here?
So the business was founded in 2012, and for the first sort of 6 months, what we did was we drop ship supplements. So for those of you that don't know, we didn't have enough money to buy stock. So I just wanted involvement in the fitness industry. So a friend of mine actually worked at USN, who I think are based over in Longbridge. And I went to him and I said, can I buy just some USN supplements? So they do protein powders and things like that, because I want to be involved in fitness. He asked around and he came back and he said, yeah, that's fine. We can do it for you. But the minimum order is, I think it was £8,000 or something like that. And I'd never, me getting 8,000, my hands on £8,000 just wasn't a thing. So that was immediately gone. So I was like, right, now where do I go? So we did drop ship him. So what that is our website had hundreds and hundreds of supplements on, but none of the stock we actually owned. If someone bought it off the Gymshark website, it would trigger another retailer to ship it off to them and we'd make a small margin. So a £50 supplement, you'd make about £2 profit on. But going back to learning, it was a transactional website that sold product. So that was the leap and that was the learn for us. Now, after doing that for a while, albeit it was going relatively well, I realized because we are essentially marking up other retailers' product, you're never really going to be massively competitive. So it was that point, combined with the fact that we realized that no one was making the clothes that we wanted to wear. We bought the screen printer and the sewing machine. Talk about the stars aligning. At the time, my nan was doing a course in how to make curtains. My mom also knew how to sew. So those pair taught me how to sew and use the sewing machine. You know, the screen printer, a local lad, was sort of into screen printing. So he taught us how to do it and just started making those clothes. So we did that for about 18 months, 2 years. And I won't lie, I think people look back and they're like, oh, how was it? Was it fun? Was it exciting? And at times it was, I will admit, it was exciting at times, but also waking up in January, early in the morning when all your mates had been out the night before and it's about -2 outside and you're stamping on the hose to crush the ice out so you can, you know, wipe down the screen and then do another 12-hour day printing. That probably wasn't quite as enjoyable as what people would think. But yeah, we did that for about 2 years. And I must admit, that was probably when we were taking some of the biggest risks as well, in terms of leaps of faith and stars aligning. During that period, I actually started to get product produced elsewhere. But because we couldn't afford it, I was sort of asking around, I was calling up people, I was having Skype calls and whatnot, just sort of trying to get someone to send us product before we would be able to pay for it, just because we couldn't afford to do it. And I was so lucky. And there was a guy called Tanvir who had a factory and he produced us about 300 pairs of shorts and we didn't have to pay for them until a month after, which now I know.
Was he West Midlands?
No, so he was based out in Pakistan. And right. This guy Tanvir just did us an incredible favor and I'll never forget it. He made us 300 pairs of shorts. He sent them over and he said, listen, just pay when you can. The shorts sold, we paid him back immediately. And, you know, we started off a great relationship from there. But yeah, we had a few favors along the way. We did get very lucky, but we had a 2-year period where we were hand making products at home before we transitioned into producing via like legitimate factories.
And I read that it sort of hit home to you that this was going to be a business when you did a pop-up or had a stand at Expo at the NEC. Just tell people about that.
So as a kid growing up, it was probably for the 2 years prior to Gymshark. There was this event at the Birmingham NEC called Body Power, which was like a pilgrimage for me and my mates. It was like the thing you look forward to. And I remember actually, funnily enough, the year before we ended up going, I was heartbroken because I had a shift at Pizza Hut on that day. And the shift would always start at 5 o'clock, but the NEC was probably about half an hour from where I worked. So I had to leave early. So basically I could only do sort of half the day. So I was a bit heartbroken about that. But growing up, we would go to this event and it was like the best thing ever, because the American lifters would come in, the guys would come in from Europe, all the UK guys would come in, and just everything that we loved was all in one space for one weekend. So when Gymshark first started, I was also visiting there, and I had a sort of a gut-wrenching feeling that we had to be there the following year. So walked up to the place where you book a stand, and there was a couple of guys there, Ollie and Steve, who are now good friends of mine. And I just said to them, listen, I would like a stand. I've got no idea how this works or what you do. All I know is I want just one-time stand, please, at next year's Expo. They told me, I think it was about £3,000. Now, we didn't have £3,000, but the lucky thing was you had 12 months to pay for it. So I sort of backed myself, because at that point we were, we had revenue and we were selling things. I sort of backed myself to be able to cover that cost. And even from Pizza Hut, I could probably cover up a proportion of it anyway. So we booked into this stand just purely on gut feeling. Now, in the year that followed, the Gymshark started to grow and we started to get revenue. And we actually upgraded the £3,000 stand to a £6,000 stand. So that was, that was huge for us. That was 100% uplift. And we ended up doing this event. Now, we did something slightly different at this event. Now, I'm not saying it was a formal event, but there was very much a status quo in terms of how it was built. And it was generally, you come and visit our stand, you buy our product, and then you get to meet our people. Whereas what we did is we brought YouTubers in, because we didn't watch TV, we only watch YouTube. And we put them out front and we said, come and chat to us, even we went in into Ironworks after each day, and we lifted just down the road from here. And it was a proper community event, and almost like, by the way, if you want to buy some product, then it's around the back. And it just went absolutely crazy. And the stand was completely rammed every single day. We would lift in Ironworks every single night. And during which my dad and my brother went back to our sort of shed that we had at the time, and sort of shipped out orders over the weekend. Now, over the weekend, the website was actually off and they were only shipping orders from the previous week. So after the event was done, I was incredibly proud. We'd absolutely smashed it. And on the Monday after, I essentially turned the website back on and I posted on Facebook and so on. Now, before the event, our daily revenue was around £200 or £300, I think, about $500 a day. And after the event, we did £30,000 in revenue in half an hour. Every single product on the website sold out. I actually had at the time, because the sales were so low, every product was set to infinite stock levels, because I thought we're never going to sell more than a handful of product a day. I was clawing at my laptop at 1 o'clock in the morning, going through each product, setting it manually to 0, because there was no like quick way of doing it. And yet we sold £30,000 of product in half an hour, and that was the moment where I knew that we were onto something special.
And did you cope with that? Because quite often that's where businesses fail, isn't it? Where they sort of, because they lift off very quickly, they haven't got the sort of substance or the environment behind them to succeed and can't get product.
So because that was such a one-off huge day, like sales did go back to a sort of a reasonable number after that. We did manage it. It was really difficult, and we just had sort of all-nighters for the next couple of weeks of hand making the product. But we did manage it. But it was at that point we actually had the capital and so on to start to look at what we were doing. So at that point, we employed my brother, who was the first employee full time. And there was a handful of our other friends who we started to bring on. It was actually a couple of months after that we then got a new sort of nice, shiny warehouse, which was quite nice as well. So that's when we started to invest in the business.
And just the strategy of and it's called a strategy now because it's worked. You say, you invited YouTubers, and obviously a massive amount's been made of your use of influencers. But again, was that because that was the age you were growing up in, and it was just the thing to do to look at YouTube?
Yeah, I love this. It's funny because everyone's like, "Oh, Gymshark's influencer marketing strategy." I'm like, we were just aimlessly wandering around in the dark and tripped over it. To be honest, it was just because we didn't watch telly, we watched YouTube. So we were like, let's sponsor our heroes. And the YouTubers genuinely were like my heroes. I'm fortunate now to be able to call them my friends, but my heroes were Lex Griffin from Manchester, Matt Ogers from Sacramento, Chris Lovato from San Francisco. These people were legitimately the people that I idolized growing up because they were doing what I wanted to do. So it was a little bit of just a really cool thing to be able to send them the product. And then the Americans had never been to the UK, like they'd never left the States. So at that point, when we said, listen, we'll fly you over to the UK, they were buzzing because, again, they were leaving the States. So we definitely tripped up upon it. And it was in this moment that we created this marketing mix without even meaning to, of a direct to consumer e-commerce strategy with an offline event, working with YouTubers and influencers who genuinely believe in the product and the brand's vision. And this is where it actually started.
And I know Andy's talked about you know being very the region being very proud of Gymshark's success. Just very quickly, influencers aren't a new thing now, are they? You picked up the idea from the jewelry quarter. Just tell people about that.
Yes, we did. So as a kid, so obviously jewelry quarter, for those of you that don't know, is in the city centre of Birmingham, and historically I think the vast majority of the UK's jewelry or gold was made there. Now, as a kid, I remember being told that when the royal family would come and visit Birmingham, all the different sort of merchants in the jewelry quarter, because it was full of lots of little shops with sort of houses either behind or above, they would all try and get their jewelry on the royal family, because they knew that if the royal family wore their jewelry, then it would just blow up, right? And when people say to me, will influencer marketing go away or die? I genuinely think it won't, because it's always been around. So if you go back to the jewelry quarter, it was around in those days. You look at what even like some of our competitors like Nike have done with some of the sports stars, it's worked incredibly well for them. I just think this is the next iteration of that.
Okay. So business growing. Was there any stage where you thought, I've done fairly well here, there might be a bit of interest for me to sell at this stage because I'm young, I'm going to university?
So I'll be honest, I don't really talk about this very often. Pretty much every other month since the age of 20, so that's 8 years now, there has always been someone that's wanted to buy the business. It's been something that it's almost like all I've ever known, to be honest. But I'm genuinely so passionate about the business, and I feel like I've got the best job in the world. So why would I ever lose that? So one, I believe in the vision. Two, I feel like I've got the best job in the world. And yes, there has been interest, but for me, I love what I do.
So a skill set to spawn a startup and take it, if you like, from 0 to 20 employees, another skill set to take it to 100, and then another skill set beyond that. When did you realize, especially at a young age, that you'd probably have to bring on somebody with corporate experience, and how easy was that for you to admit, if you like?
So I was lucky, going back to the gym. I met someone in the gym, a guy called Paul Richardson, who then put me in touch with a guy called Steve Hewitt, who's now our chief exec. And Paul,
he just knew him through work or socially, or
just in the gym, to be honest. So Paul was an ex-director at Birmingham City Football Club. Right. I'm a Villa fan, by the way, so I've never forgiven him.
You still talk to
him. And he was just known in the gym as like the business guy because of that. So when we'd have problems, I'd just sort of go to him and I'd sort of like, edge over to him. He'd be on the bench press and I'd be like, hey, Paul, what do I do? What do I do when this happens? Or how do I hire our first employee? Or do you know a good accountant? And those sorts of questions. And I just kept pecking his head every day. And I think he just got so sick and tired of me. He said, right, I'm going to come on and help you guys. So we brought Paul on, and then Steve came on as well. And to be honest, I will admit, to trust them and the people that we hired at the start was utterly heartbreaking, because one, it made me realize that I'm in no way special. There are people that are significantly better in their own ways than I am. And a lot of the stuff that I'd done for the business, quite frankly, wasn't actually that good. I'll never forget.
Sorry to interrupt, but how, especially at a fairly tender age business-wise, how easy is it for you to actually admit that? Did you admit it at the time, or do you have to look back and say, that's a mistake?
Slowly but surely, I will admit. So I'll tell you a story. There's a guy called Chris who we brought in, essentially to fix the back end of our operations and tech systems. Now, at the time, I don't know if it still is, it might still be, the Royal Mail system of integrating with e-commerce websites was prehistoric, right? For those of you that know, you essentially exported a CSV from your website, stuck it in the Royal Mail system, it would go into a printer and it would fire off a load of labels that you then manually stuck on the packages. I made this minor thing which basically automated that, export it from the website and stick it into the Royal Mail system, and it was done. I thought that was really cool and I was really proud of that. And on Chris's first day, he looked at it and he was like, this is terrible. It's not robust. It's going to fall over and it's just poorly made. And he didn't know I was listening, but I was sat about 10 feet behind him and I was heartbroken / angry, all of these emotions going through my head, thinking, I did that and that was really good and I was happy with that. But I sort of let it go, and ultimately he was completely right. So I think as people do things like that, and you realize that they're right, I think it becomes self-evident, to be honest. But I must admit, that's probably one of the most difficult emotional things I had to go through in the early days of the business.
And if you hadn't done that and you persisted with you running it, do you think it would have been a different trajectory?
100%. It would be a lifestyle business, and it would be infinitely smaller than what it is now. And by the way, I just want to say as well, having worked in my granddad's lifestyle business, there's no, I don't think there's a right or wrong. It was a very conscious decision of ours to shift from a smaller lifestyle business in the 4, 5, 6, 10 million pound revenue to where we are today. And I also think it was a big risk. So I think 9 times out of 10, that shift that we attempted to take probably would have failed. I think we were very fortunate due to timing and people and so on that allowed us to make that shift. So yeah, it was tough. And the other thing that was tough was the shift in what it required from me. So as a lifestyle business, especially doing something quite new, which is what we were doing, particularly at the time, I could afford to be quite arrogant, egotistical, almost ignoring other opinions to sort of forward my own, because I had the vision for the business. Now, when you shift into that next stage and you start to build a genuine team around you, I quickly learned that my skill set was better off listening to those, sort of amalgamating what they say, and then trying to communicate a strategy with them. Then as the business continued to grow closer to what it is today, my role is essentially articulating the vision to the hundreds of people around the world, because it's just too large for me to go in and do one thing. And I'd always be sort of undermining people if I was to jump in and try and fix something myself when they know better.
So just skate us through fairly swiftly, from that situation to where you are now, number of employees, Blythe Valley Park, when did that move happen? Another thing I wanted to ask, have you ever been tempted to move it away from the West Midlands?
So I'll start off by saying, yeah, well, I haven't been tempted as such. So I love it here. I was born in Redditch. I grew up in Bromsgrove. I went to university at Aston. And as a kid, we would do the weekly pilgrimage to Villa Park, having season tickets to watch Martin O'Neill manage the club back in the day, in the glory days, albeit they are coming back. I love it here. I absolutely love it. And I've got so many memories, and I love what Jaguar Land Rover do. I'll always remember growing up when MG Rover went out of business in Longbridge, and like a load of people on the street ended up losing their jobs, and the ups and the downs of being here. I absolutely love it here. And I've always thought that there's a hotbed of talent that just isn't being maximized. And I'd like to think that through Gymshark, we've helped prove that, because so many of the people that work at Gymshark now are actually very local from the West Midlands. Yes, we have been tempted to move it south. And before we moved to Solihull, there was a lot of pull for us to go down south. And there were a lot of people that were saying, you get better talent down there. It's easier to hire. If people are coming from abroad, it's easier for them to live in London than it is the West Midlands. And to be fair to them, I think they're valid points. But I think the opportunity in the West Midlands is massive. Like I said, there's huge talent. It's different. Like, ultimately, the West Midlands pound per square foot is cheaper than London. That's why we can create such the incredible campus that we're creating on Blythe Valley now. And I'm so proud of that. In terms of the scale of the business, so when we were talking before, 300 quid a day, 2020, last year, we had a huge moment actually where we broke quite comfortably in the end, $500 million in revenue. And the $500 million in revenue mark is like, especially amongst the unicorn brands, that's like a very big moment, because that's when they sort of consider you a more larger scale business. We sell into 180 different countries, hundreds and hundreds of millions of website visits, billions of different page clicks on the website. And I'm going to be honest, it's unfathomable how quickly it's growing and how quickly it continues to grow.
And obviously it's with Venturefest, a lot of focus on technology, and obviously everyone knows social media has been a big part of what you do. I saw you got 2 million followers on TikTok, and that's more than Nike. Mm-hmm. What percentage of your team is dedicated to the sort of technology media wise?
So So what we've got, so we split our business. So in terms of tech, it will be quite a large proportion. That's where you've got your developers, your infrastructure guys, your people that are creating the user experience. Separate to that, we have a social team, and then the social team is split between organic social and paid social. So I mean, between those two, you're looking at about 30% of the business. So it's not a massive amount, and this goes back to the area that we're in, is that creativity doesn't require huge resource. You don't require to be in a certain area, specifically now, given the digital world that we live in. So yeah, we've got an incredible creative team that help lead our social media strategy. And ultimately as well, one of the superpowers that we have is our agility. So you go back to saying 2 million on TikTok. We had 1.2 million followers on TikTok before any other fitness brand opened an account. And that's where, if I'm watching this, and if you take away one thing, never underestimate the power of agility and speed.
And do you, put frankly, do you irritate the hell out of these big brands? Can you tell they get annoyed that you're an agitator?
To be honest, not really, because we work in a different space, I will say. So a lot of the larger brands are very much focused on sport. Now, Gymshark is around fitness and conditioning, which it's probably historically more difficult to understand the difference. But I think as we see trends, you'll see a different trend between someone that's very much into sport and someone that's very much into fitness and conditioning. So right now, no, but I don't know what the future holds.
And obviously, we talked about the decision of bringing in corporates, that you did a sale of 21% of the business to General Atlantic. Mm-hmm. Why then, and why then? What's that money going to allow you to do? And why, you must have had loads of suitors. Why did you particularly go with them?
Well, so GA, we chose GA because they were an incredible cultural fit, and they've got incredible resources around the world, particularly in the two areas that we want to grow, North America and the APAC region. Why now? I was told, actually, funnily enough, by Paul at a young age, try, if you can, borrow money when you don't need it. Not that we're borrowing money, but we're taking investment when we don't need it, because I don't want to be like almost desperate for it, because, you know, it's more difficult to push through at that point. And yeah, to be honest, it was to fuel our global expansion was the main reason. And I'm proper excited for where we are now.
And you should have globally expanded yourself, shouldn't you? But for COVID, you shouldn't be speaking to us from where you are, should you? Tell people.
Yeah, I was going to do a year, because we've opened up an office in Colorado, funnily enough, in the last couple of months. I was going to move out for a year, and I was going to embed the office, build the team, and then come back and carry on working at HQ. But obviously their ex-fearless leader, Donald Trump, closed all borders, which means that I could no longer go out there. So I'm here now, and I'm loving it.
So just look personally and professionally, 5 years, what's the future hold for you and for Gymshark? Where do you see things in 5 years' time?
So I think you'll see Gymshark expand into a lot more different products. I think you'll see us sort of try and impact a wider part of the fitness user's day. You'll see us expand, probably not as much here, it won't be as visible, but there will be global expansion, more expansion into North America, more expansion into the APAC region. And we're also investing for the long term. So something that's really exciting that's coming up, we're looking at investing, funnily enough, in Blythe Valley, an incredible innovation hub. So we can really start to, you know, invest for the long term and create things that have never been created before. And talking back to the roots of the West Midlands, with companies like what MG Rover were doing and JLR and things like that, I think it's really exciting to bring that sort of manufacturing knowledge back to the region.
Okay, and yourself, you'll continue to be as involved. I mean, you're day-to-day still, are you?
Yeah, every single day, pretty much 7 days a week, much to my my girlfriend's pain, bless her. So I feel like I've got the best job in the world, and I absolutely love it, and I foresee myself doing this for the long term. Yeah.
And do you, with all those pressures, commitments, etc., still go down the gym and lift as often as you did when you first got the idea?
I am 5 days a week. It's honestly, it's what keeps me sane. Genuinely, the growth has been so crazy that my professional life has become so crazy and chaotic. Having that personal life of Robin, my girlfriend, who's so solid and brilliant, alongside that hour, 5 days a week when I can go to the gym, having control over that for me and my mental and physical well-being is just utterly pivotal.
Because I presume at your age, it would be quite easy to lose your head in terms of everybody wanting to know you, get to know you, who are your friends, who aren't your friends. So I suppose staying in the Midlands from that point of view is valuable for you.
The best place in the world.
Well, look, we're going to end on that note, Ben. Thank you very much. As David and Andy said, you know, great inspirational story, both wherever you're located, but particularly proud that you're located here in the Midlands. I gather you're coming back a bit later on to contribute to Venturefest later on. So on behalf of everybody and we've got well over 200 people on, thank you very much, Ben. Really great story, and more power to your elbow for the future. Thank you very much indeed.